All right, excellent. Dr. Brian Buckstead maintains a flourishing career as violinist, violist, conductor, and educator, making significant contributions to the music world through extensive performances and teaching across the United States, Canada, Europe, and Asia. Dr. Buckstead received his Bachelor of Music degree from St. Olaf College and his Master and Doctorate from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. His principal teachers include Beatrix Lean, Charles Gray, Jennifer John, and David Perry. He has held teaching positions at various colleges and universities across Canada, Kansas, Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Canada, and is currently Associate Professor of Violin and Viola and conductor of the Hayes Symphony at Fort Hays State University in Kansas. His paper today is titled Jump Cuts and Juxtapositions, Film Editing Techniques, and Stravinsky's Petrushka. Please welcome Dr. Buckstead.
So it sounded like the audio was just coming from my computer. Did that go on in the home?
I think you're right. I had to change my audio to go out the HDMI.
So I need to change it within Zoom.
I changed it on my computer.
Because I did change it on my.
I'm sorry about that.
Let's. Okay, I went back. No, that sounded nice. This is an HDMI. That was good speakers. That's getting better. Yes. Okay, it's very nice to be here. Ooh, this is echoing. That's different. My presentation is called Jump Cuts and Juxtapositions, Film Editing Techniques in Stravinsky's Petrushka. So what I find really interesting with Petrushka is that Stravinsky uses music like a filmmaker uses film. Cutting quickly, layering images, creating dynamic contrast to tell a vivid, multi-perspective story. Through these techniques, he creates a sense of narrative flow, with rapid shifts in perspective, dramatic contrast, qualities that resemble the dynamic nature of film. So Petrushka not only tells the story or tells a story, but also immerses the listener in this dynamic, multi-perspective experience that parallels the visual and narrative technique of cinema. Stravinsky wrote Petrushka in 1911, or premiered in 1911, right after Firebird, right before Rite of Spring. It's revolutionary, quite a different way than those pieces, and different than what Schoenberg, for example, was doing at the time with his atonal explorations. Written just a year after the Firebird, Petrushka is not so much a summary of his compositional techniques to that point, but rather a bold and fresh musical perspective on new ways to put a piece of music together. Stravinsky made so many discoveries in this piece that it has a special influential aura all its own, separate from the Rite of Spring, again, that followed. He would use various techniques with this piece, including complex ostinatos, pan-diatonicus, heterophony, additive rhythm, polytonality, and most importantly for this presentation, collage technique, or we could say film editing techniques, superimposition, hard cuts, jump cuts, dissolves, cross cuts, cutaways. I'll go through what some of those mean in just a bit. Now, a quick overview of the structure of Petrushka. It takes place in 4 tableaux or scenes. It tells the story of 3 Russian puppets brought to life by a charlatan during the 1830 Shrovetide Fair. So Petrushka is in love with a ballerina. She prefers the war. These are the 3 main characters, Petrushka, the ballerina, and war. Tensions rise between the puppets. At the end of the ballet, the war kills Petrushka. The fair owners are horrified, but the showman, the puppeteer, reminds them that these are just stuffed dolls at the end. As night falls, the charlatan drags Petrushka's limp body off the stage and is startled to see the ghost of the puppet standing on the roof. the audience is left wondering whether the puppets really were alive. Now, we have a little bit of a background. What is this connection? Is there a connection between Petrushka and cinema? Well, it was connected to cinematic technique. I think Stravinsky connects musical ideas in Petrushka more akin to film editing than traditional harmonic progression or musical form. Now, he did compose Petrushka in 1911 when cinema was quite in its infancy. The beginnings of cinema started in the 1890s with Thomas and Edison's kinetoscope, followed soon with the cinematograph of the Lumiere brothers. The earliest films were very simple, short, generally static shots, although the language and sophistication of cinema would develop quickly over the next 25 years. By 1911, there was a more or less the standard cinematic language. Now, was Stravinsky influenced by the early development of cinema, or was he perhaps more familiar with the magic lantern of his childhood, which was an early image projector, an ancestor of the motion picture projector, a popular means of visual storytelling for centuries before the 20th century. Now, we don't know these answers. We don't know if Stravinsky saw early cinema in the early 1900s. We can only assume he saw magic lantern shows since they were very widespread throughout Europe and Russia. But again, we don't know. But what we do have in Petrushka is Stravinsky treating musical ideas, in a sense, like visual elements. They may be superimposed on each other, contrasted abruptly like a hard cut, foreshadowed briefly like a jump cut, faded gradually into a new idea like a dissolve. Move quickly from detail to detail in cutaway shots. But I'm using kind of a few film terms here, so let me go over a few of these techniques so we kind of have the ground base on what I'm talking about. Now, here are several of the most important film editing techniques that I think are comparable to Stravinsky's compositional process in Petrushka. I'm going to show a clip that demonstrates many of these devices. A brief description. Again, I think montage is central here as this kind of sequence of shots assembled and juxtapositioned with one another to create an emotional impact. An establishing shot is a shot that establishes a scene, kind of overview, bird's eye shot. A cut is a transition from one to another. That's the most common technique that we see in film. One shot from the camera ends and cuts straight to another one. Cross-cutting is a technique where if we have a scene and there's an action going on and the director cuts from one shot to maybe one character to another character, or from a character to an action near the character back to the character him or herself. That's called cross-cutting. And that's similar to a cutaway. A jump cut is an abrupt cut that creates a lack of continuity between shots by leaving out parts of the action. We will have some jump cuts in Petrushka. A dissolve is when the end of one shot overlaps the start of the next one to create a gradual scene transition. I can hear some dissolves in Petrushka. And a fade is a visual effect where we kind of indicate a change in place and time, with a screen fading out into a new scene. Often that's a fade to black, although it could be a fade to white, and then the scene fades back in. Now, montage, I think, is the key term when thinking of the connection between Petrushka and film techniques. If there's an overriding term that describes Stravinsky's process, it's this. In film, montage is the process or technique of selecting, editing, piecing together separate sections of film to form a continuous whole. Often this is used to condense space, time, and information, but it's a collection of separate shots that individually don't necessarily have meaning, but when put together, they form a meaningful whole. So if montage means assembling fragments into a meaningful whole, I think Stravinsky layers short ideas into vibrant musical mosaics, just like a montage. To demonstrate some of these techniques, So you can visually see what's going on. I've got, there are many great montage sequences through the history of cinema, but I found a Russian example would be appropriate. So this is Battleship Potemkin, Sergei Eisenstein's very famous 1925 film. A famous sequence within this is the Odessa steps sequence. Now, the whole sequence is too long to show here, that would take the rest of my presentation. So I will just show a bit of it to give you an idea. As we watch it, I want you to notice a few things. Notice the interspersed establishing shots or the wide shots where you see where you see large groups of people, where you see a big section of the steps. Notice that there will be some cuts to medium shots, close-ups of characters, the quick cutting, the cross cutting, the jump cuts between the stairs, the characters, the soldiers coming down, shooting them, the asymmetrical visual rhythm of this sequence. Right, we need to jump in and understand this a bit. Let's start right about here. Now, there's there's another establishing shot. Another establishing shot from the other perspective. Cut to a different perspective. Cut to a close-up. Interesting camera movement. Multiple cuts on that one. Short scene. Quick close-up. Another wide shot. Okay, I'm going to jump ahead to the end of this. Yeah. Okay, it gives you an idea of some of the editing techniques. So many of Eisenstein's choices were revolutionary. He constantly changes the tempo of his shots, cutting from longer drawn-out sequences to jump cuts to keep the viewers kind of off balance, as if we were in that scenario not knowing what was going on. He varies the direction of movement of both the camera and the crowd. The sequence ends in one of the first and most clever montages in music history, where when the battleship responds to the massacre by firing on the city, Eisenstein cuts, as you saw right there, to 3 lion statues in quick succession, as if one lion were alive, standing up in reaction to 3 quick cuts. Is this still working? Okay. Now, going back to Stravinsky now. Looking at the outline of the scenario, with the first and last scenes taking place at the fair, And the middle scene confined to interiors, we can sense Stravinsky painting a multifaceted portrait of Petrushka. So these distinct tableau each represent a different part of the story. And these abrupt shifts in musical material and mood resemble, I think, cinematic cuts between scenes. For example, the bustling carnival atmosphere, I'll play this in a moment. Bustling carnival atmosphere in the opening tableau gives way to a more introspective and surreal world of Petrushka's room, which is marked by contrasting themes and very contrasting orchestration. So from carnival to Petrushka's room, to the Moore's room, back to the carnival. Each scene has unique orchestration and harmony, kind of like different film sets. So Stravinsky uses music to evoke specific settings and activities in a way that feels almost cinematic. For example, the hustle and bustle of the '25 fair is vividly depicted through a kaleidoscope of orchestral colors, polyrhythms, folk-inspired melodies. So these first and last tableaux take place in the real world of the fair. There's no real story, but instead highlighting action of the fair. So we hear melody, we hear folk music, we hear the surge of life. The orchestra is full and busy, enlivened by layers of frenzied activity. So first I'll play this and you can just listen to it. I'll play it later on with the score so you can see what's going on. But just imagine a busy fair with the camera sort of panning through the fair and with all of these different activities going on. That's very quiet. Right in? Okay, and if we compare that to the second tableau, jumping ahead here, just give you a sense of the new scene, the different sound, the different orchestration. So very different orchestration. We have smaller groups of instruments playing. The music is more disjunct in that second tableau. There's an avoidance of folk material like in the first tableau. Even Stravinsky builds his music on different harmonies, different scales, the octatonic scale. So even without the visual element, the shape and character of the story are projected, I think, very much in Stravinsky's score. Stravinsky's innovative use of rhythm with unpredictable accents, frequent changes of meter, again, creates the sense of motion and urgency and the energy of film editing, like we saw in the Eisenstein example, with the asymmetrical cuts in the film. In the dance sequences, especially in Petrushka, with these rapid rhythmic shifts, it really contributes to a sense of visual emotion, as though the music is being guided by an unseen choreography of camera movements. And this is, I think, is the equivalent to the asymmetrical visual rhythm that we saw on that quick battleship attempting sea. Now, Stravinsky often uses layers of different musical ideas and juxtaposes contrasting textures, similar to how films use cross-cutting to show simultaneous action. In the opening of the ballet, the crowd, I'll go back to that now, we'll look at the score. The crowd scene features layers of melodies and rhythmic gospel notes, giving a sense of simultaneous activity. Kind of like a panoramic shot, an establishing shot of a busy carnival. Now, this new montage technique is a bit like film editing. In the opening scene, you can hear a bustling fair scene, multiple events are happening. The audience can watch sellers, street entertainers. And Stravinsky cleverly composes this musical collage of conflicting musical elements, but ties them all together. So again, imagine a camera lens panning across the fair. From one moment to the next, we might hear multiple activities going on. Then there's a jump cut to an organ grinder, for example. So let me look at this again and show a bit of the score. Superimposing multiple ideas one on top of the other. One that every unit of the whole orchestra comes together. So the quick one measure is all into 2 orchestra. Green is kind of clear, like a white, and green is beam. A hard cut back to the opening material. And these dissolves to a close-up of an organ grinder. A jump up back to the other material that we just did. And without any transition, music resolves back to that organ grinder. Now soon we're going to hear a superimposition, like as in 2 visual elements combined one on top of the other. Okay. So we heard the quick cut without any transition at all to that. Suddenly a close-up of the organ grinder, just one character within that fair scene. So Stravinsky's orchestration paints a really vivid sonic picture. It's kind of like a film director using lighting and color to create atmosphere. For example, the bright timbres of the carnival scenes contrast sharply with when we heard that second tableau, the more intimate, darker textures, the smaller groups of instruments within the second tableau of Petrushka's room. How much time do I have? Fair enough, okay, let me, quickly go ahead here. Stravinsky also, creates kind of distinctive musical themes with each character, treating them kind of like leitmotifs. We have the theme of Petrushka himself, the ballerina, the Moor, and these are developed, these are changed as in like a cinematic technique throughout Petrushka. Even Petrushka's famous chord, this bitonal combination of C major, F sharp major, if we again are within this cinematic world, it captures his tragic, conflicted, frenetic personality, and this use of bitonality almost functions like a cinematic dissolve, a superimposition, with two overlapping harmonic spaces, as if we have two overlapping exposures from the camera, one on top of the other. Yeah. So these distinctive themes delve into the emotional, psychological space of the characters, like a film might use close-ups or internal monologues. Petrushka's dissonant and fragmented theme mirrors his inner turmoil and longing for freedom. Stravinsky's innovations with Petrushka were numerous, but perhaps the most far-reaching were the editing techniques that Stravinsky used. They provided him not only with a way to create dazzling original musical textures, but a way to organize a piece of music in a fresh way. In other words, these devices were a way to delineate different sections in a clear manner that did not require, for example, the sophistication of sonata form, fugue, or other classical structures that depend on harmonic progression. But they did help free musical structure from harmony. Even through these innovative means, Stravinsky still does rely and build on standard harmonic practice, but he extends tonality. And this quest to extend tonality becomes one of the most significant paths in 20th century music. Thank you.
All right, we have time for a couple of questions. Brian, why don't you take the questions from the floor and I'll deal with the ones online.
Sure. Any questions?
One question, we're out of time.
Ready for